Reading through the Bible in 1 year, March 25th, Exodus 36, John 15, Proverbs chapter 12, and Ephesians chapter 5. Now Bezalel and Aholiab, and every person wise at heart, to whom Yahweh has given wisdom and discernment to know how to do all the work of the service of constructing the sanctuary, shall do in accordance with all that Yahweh has commanded. See how this works? God specifically chose individual people for a specific task, and he made sure that they had the knowledge necessary to do the thing. Now, I know me personally, this is something I used to struggle with quite a bit, was whether or not God had actually called me to do one thing or another. And it was a real struggle for me personally. Because I thought, well, I'm not as smart as that person. I'm not as gifted as this person. And I worried about those things. We read about this as we read through the gifts in 1 Corinthians and explaining how people will look at different giftings that they're given and they'll worry that they're not as, they weren't given as such a great gift as this person over here. Or they don't appreciate their gift as much as if they had that gift that someone else was given. So we see the same things and the same type of struggles that we endure. But what do we see here? Remember, this isn't, within Scripture, there are a lot of things that are descriptive, saying just this is a thing that happened, and many things that are prescriptive, saying this is something that we're supposed to expect to see more of. For instance, when we get into the book of Judges, almost the entire book is descriptive. We're not seeing anything in that book that is something that we should emulate in our lives or in our daily conduct. But when we see the way that Jesus lived, as did the apostles, well, those are prescriptive. Those are ways that we should choose to emulate, that we should try to follow after what it is that God is doing through these people. When it comes to this is more prescriptive than it is descriptive. How do we know that? Well, first look at Moses. Moses was 80 years old when he was called. And there are many people who will say, even if they come to Christ at a late age, that they're just, it's too long for them. They're just riding it out until the end. And they're glad that they came to Christ, but they don't worry so much about other things because in the end, does it really matter? And there are a lot of people who feel that way about it, that, they don't, even if God were to give them an amazing gifting, it wouldn't matter because they're near the end of their life. Moses was 80 years old when he was called to the ministry. He didn't have any formal training. He was a shepherd. He grew up in the temple, so he had education from them. But he was never trained in how to lead because they never expected him to learn how to do anything or to serve at all, or rather to be served at all. So he wasn't trained in leadership. So that's Moses's life. And yet God called him to be his judge and a prophet to the people. His brother was the one who was made priest. He became a great symbol for the people until they later had Christ given to them. But they would look back on their days with Moses and say, as it was in the days of Moses, or they would sing the song of Moses. But Moses didn't have any formal training. God gave him what he needed in that time. Just as we read here in this first verse, and as we've read previously about the same thing, God, when he calls people to purpose, when he calls them to their designated roles in their gifting, he makes sure to give them what they need so that they can serve him properly. And that's what we see here. Again, God is the one, Yahweh, has given wisdom and discernment to know how to do all the work of the service of constructing the sanctuary. Who's to say he doesn't do the same for you? Who's to say whatever gift you've been given, if you're afraid of using it, you shouldn't just step out in faith? Learn to trust in the things God has given you. Read as many books as you can. Uh, in my own example, I have long tried to do any kind of book learning or tried to get into a seminary, that kind of thing. But I've learned over the years that my brain just doesn't work well with classroom style learning. I learn a lot of things, but my capacity to learn specific things just kind of ends at what seems to be random times. I have tons of books that are half read or that I've kind of flipped to in the middle and I've read a section of it and then I've stopped. Why? Because I'm not getting anything out of it. If I pour of the same book for weeks on end, I will get nothing out of it. And I've learned in my own life that that's just God letting me know I need to stop focusing on this thing. I need to stop chasing after things that I want to have and instead turn and trust to God and whatever he wants me to learn and understand. And of those things that I've learned and read about, I've been able to turn and teach them to other people. Many cases, God has given me object lessons in those things so I can experience it in different ways and be able to relate that to other people. But in the other sections of those books that I've tried to read, nothing. It's not that I didn't learn it or I wasn't a good enough student. Maybe I didn't pray hard enough beforehand, right? But it's none of those things. This is just what God has chosen for me to know so that I can better serve his people. So that's what I do. I may follow along with seminary classes online, and I may have lots of friends who are in seminary. Those who have their MDiv or master's degrees or even PhDs in things like theology. But I can't really focus as well on things like that. It's just not the way my brain works. But God has gifted me, as he did Bezalel and Aholiab, in the ability to teach specific things to specific people. And I just trust that whatever I teach, that God is the one who's making sure that those people who are receiving it are receiving what they need. Verse 2. It's only been 7.5 minutes. Verse 2. Then Moses called Bezalel and Aholiab, and every person wise at heart, to whom Yahweh had given wisdom. Everyone whose heart stirred him to come to do the work. This is another thing you'll notice. If God is pushing you to do a specific thing, you'll feel it. And the term stirred in your heart, you'll have had the same experience where something's driving you to do something. You don't really know how or why, but you just feel like compelled to do it. Same thing here. And they received from Moses the entire contribution which the sons of Israel had brought to do the work in the service of the sanctuary. And they still continued to bring him free will offerings every morning. And all the wise men who were doing all the work of the sanctuary came, each from the work he was doing. And they said to Moses, "The people are bringing much more than enough for the work, for the service of the work which Yahweh commanded us to do." So Moses commanded, and a proclamation was passed throughout all the camp, saying, "Let no man or woman any longer do the work of the contributions for the sanctuary." Thus the people were restrained from bringing any more. Indeed, the material that they had was sufficient and more than enough for all the work to do it. And those wise at heart among those who were doing the work made the tabernacle with 10 curtains of fine twisted linen in blue and purple and scarlet material, with cherubim, the work of a skillful designer. Bezalel made them. The length of each curtain was 28 cubits long, with the width of each curtain 4 cubits, and all the curtains had the same measurements. He joined 5 curtains to one another, and the other 5 curtains he joined to one another. He made loops of blue on the edge of the outermost curtain in the first set, and he did likewise on the edge of the curtain that was the outermost in the second set. He made 50 loops in the one curtain and 50 loops on the edge of the other curtain that was in the second set. The loops were opposite each other. He made 50 clasps of gold and joined the curtains to one another with the clasps. So the tabernacle was one unit. Then he made curtains of goat's hair for a tent over the tabernacle. He made 11 curtains in all. The length of each curtain was 30 cubits, and 4 cubits was the width of each curtain. And the 11 curtains had the same measurements. He joined 5 curtains by themselves and the other 6 curtains by themselves. Moreover, he made 50 loops on the edge of the curtain that was outermost in the first set, and he made 50 loops on the edge of the curtain that was outermost in the second set. He made 50 clasps of bronze to join the tent together so that it would be a single unit. He made a covering for the tent of ram skins dyed red, and a covering of porpoise skins above. Again, we've talked about the porpoise skins. Then he made the boards for the tabernacle of acacia wood, standing upright. 10 cubits was the length of each board, and in 1.5 cubits the width of each board. There were 2 tenons for each board, fitted to one another. Thus he did for all the boards of the tabernacle. And he made the boards for the tabernacle, 20 boards for the south side. And he made the 40 bases of silver under the 20 boards, 2 bases under one board for its 2 tenons, and 2 bases under another board for its 2 tenons. Then, for the second side of the tabernacle, on the north side, he made 20 boards, and their 40 bases of silver, 2 bases under one board and 2 bases under another board. For the rear of the tabernacle, to the west, he made 6 boards, and he made 2 boards for the corners of the tabernacle at the rear. And they were separated beneath, but were together at their completion at the top. And at the first ring, thus he did with both of them for the 2 corners. And there were 8 boards with their bases of silver, 16 bases, 2 bases under every board. Then he made bars of acacia wood for the 5 for the boards of one side of the tabernacle, and 5 bars for the boards of the other side of the tabernacle, and 5 bars for the boards of the tabernacle for the rear side to the west. And he made the middle bar to pass through the center of the boards from end to end. He also overlaid the boards with gold, and made their rings of gold as holders for the bars, and overlaid the bars with gold. Moreover, he made the veil of blue and purple and scarlet material and fine twisted linen. He made it with cherubim, the work of a skillful designer. And he made 4 pillars of acacia wood, acacia for it, and overlaid them with gold, and with their hooks of gold. And he cast 4 bases of silver for them. And he made a screen for the doorway of the tent, of blue and purple and scarlet material and fine twisted linen, the work of a weaver. And he made its 5 pillars with their hooks, and he overlaid their tops and their bands with gold, but their bases were of bronze. Move on now to John chapter 15. Jesus continues teaching his disciples, I am the vine, and my Father is the vine grower. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. And every branch that bears fruit, he cleans it so that it may bear more fruit. You are already clean because of the word which I have spoken to you. Now, if you notice this section, if you're following along visually, you can see how many times Jesus says in the next 7 verses, the word, I guess it's 8 verses, the word abide. Remember, abide means to live and remain. To live in one space and to stay there with the intent not to leave. Verse 4, abide in me, live and remain in me, and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit from itself unless it abides in the vine, so neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, and you are the branches. He who abides in me, and I in him, he bears much fruit, for apart from me, you can do nothing. If anyone does not abide in me, well, he is thrown away as a branch and dries up, and they gather them and cast them into the fire, and they are burned. If you abide in me, and my words abide in you, Ask whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. My Father is glorified in this, that you bear much fruit, and so prove to be my disciples. Just as the Father loved me, I have also loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, second time he said it in this discourse, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. These things I have spoken to you, so that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be complete. This is my commandment. People often ask, well, what are the commandments of Christ? Here, this is my commandment, that you love one another, just as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, that one laid down his life for his friends. And you are my friends if you do what I command you. I no longer call you slaves, for the slave does not know what his master is doing, but I have called you friends. For all things that I have heard from my Father, I have made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you, that you would go and bear fruit, and that your fruit would abide, so that whatever you ask of the Father in my name, he may give to you. This I command you, that you love one another. If the world hates you, know that it has hated me before it hated you. This isn't him going, well, I had it worse than you. What he's doing is he's reminding them that if you abide in him, if we take Jesus's word, as did the prophets, where they ate those scrolls and it became a part of their being, if we so take Christ into our own lives and he becomes a part of our being, if the world hated him, well, then we're doing well if the world hates us as well. This doesn't mean if you're a jerk on the highway and you flip people off and cut people off and whatever else, well, then they have another reason to hate you. But if they hate you because you are associated with Christ, because you reflect Christ, because you bear the aroma of Christ, if they look at you and they see Jesus and therefore they hate you for it, then you are doing well. Verse 19, if you were of the world, well, the world would love its own. But because you are not of the world, but I chose you out of the world. So we were part of the world, and Jesus chose us out of the world and plucked us out of that, and has set us apart, made us holy for his purposes. He chose us out of the world because of this. Because we're no longer of the world anymore. The world hates us. Remember the word that I said to you. A slave is not greater than his master. Well, if they persecuted me, they will also persecute you. And if they kept my word, well, they will keep yours also. But all these things they will do to you for my name's sake, because they do not know the one who sent me. If I had not come and spoken to them, they would not have sinned, but now they have no excuse for their sin. He who hates me hates my Father also. If I had not done among them the works which no one else did, they would not have sinned, but now they have both seen and hated me and my Father as well. But this happened to fulfill the word that is written in their law. They hated me without cause. Quoting here from Secret Place. It's not letting me see it. Apparently at all. All right, cool. When the advocate comes, whom I will send to you from the Father, the Spirit of truth, who proceeds from the Father, he will bear witness about me. And you will bear witness also, because you have been with me from the beginning. That's all the notes to here. Are we just not showing the notes today, or what? I guess not. Okay, let's move on to Proverbs chapter 12. Whoever loves discipline hates. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of where I am. Whoever loves discipline loves knowledge, but he who hates reproof is senseless. A good man will obtain favor from Yahweh, but a man of evil schemes he will condemn. A man will not be established by wickedness, but the root of the righteous will not be shaken. An excellent wife is the crown of her husband, but she who causes shame is like rottenness in his bones. The thoughts of the righteous are just, but the guidance of the wicked is deceitful. The words of the wicked lie in wait for blood, but the mouth of the upright will deliver them. The wicked are overthrown and are no more, but the house of the righteous will stand. A man will be praised according to his insight, but one of perverse heart will be despised. Better is he who is lightly esteemed and has a servant than he who honors himself and lacks bread. A righteous man knows the value of the life of his animal, but even the compassion of the wicked is cruel. He who cultivates his land will be satisfied with bread, but he who pursues empty things lacks a heart of wisdom. The wicked man desires a stronghold of evil men, but the root of the righteous gives fruit. The snare of an evil man is the transgression of his lips, but the righteous man will come out from darkness, rather distress. A man will be satisfied with the good of the, a man will be satisfied with good by the fruit of his mouth, and the good deed of a man's hands will return to him. The way of an ignorant fool is right in his own eyes, but a wise man is he who listens to counsel. An ignorant fool's anger is known at once, but a prudent man conceals disgrace. He who breathes out truth declares what is right, but a false witness, deceit. There is one who speaks rashly, like the thrust of a sword, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. Truthful lips will be established forever, but a lying tongue is only for a moment. Deceit is in the heart of those who devise evil, but counselors of peace have gladness. No misfortune befalls the righteous, but the wicked are filled with calamity. Lying lips are an abomination to Yahweh, but doers of faithfulness are his delight. A prudent man conceals knowledge, but the heart of fools proclaims folly. The hand of the diligent will rule, but the slack hand will be put to forced labor. Anxiety in a man's heart weighs it down, but a good word makes it glad. The righteous is a guide to his neighbor, but the way of the wicked makes them wander about. A slack-handed man does not roast his prey, but the wealth of a man is precious for the diligent. And the path of righteousness is life, and in its pathway there is no death. Now Ephesians chapter 5. Paul continues, therefore, be imitators of God as beloved children, and walk in love just as Christ also loved us and gave himself up for us, an offering and a sacrifice to God as a fragrant aroma. sexual immorality or any impurity or greed must not even be named among you, as is proper among saints, nor filthiness and foolish talk or coarse jesting, which are not fitting, but rather giving of thanks. For this you know with certainty that no one sexually immoral or impure or greedy who is an idolater has an inheritance in the kingdom of Christ and God. Let no one deceive you with empty words, for because of these things the wrath of God comes upon the sons of disobedience. Therefore do not be partakers with them. For you were formerly darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Walk as children of light. For the fruit of that light consists in all goodness and righteousness and truth, trying to learn what is pleasing to the Lord. And do not participate in the unfruitful works of darkness, but instead even expose them. For it is disgraceful even to speak of things which are done by them in secret. But all things become visible when they are exposed to the light. For everything that becomes visible is light. For this reason it says, "Awake, sleeper, and arise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you. Therefore look carefully how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, redeeming the time because the days are evil." Read the notes here, it's fantastic. On account of this, do not be foolish, but understand what the will of the Lord is. And do not get drunk with wine, for that is dissipation, but be filled with the Spirit, speaking to one another in psalms, in hymns, and spiritual songs, singing and making melody with your heart to the Lord, always giving thanks for all things in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ to God, even the Father, and being subject to one another in the fear of Christ. Wives, be subject to your own husbands, as to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ also, I'm going to reread this. For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ also is the head of the church, he himself being the Savior of the body. Again, this part gets weird. Read the notes. It's not bad. It just gets people, they take it to weird places. That's all I'm going to say. Verse 24. But as the church is subject to Christ, so also the wives ought to be to their husbands in everything. Husbands. Now, first it was, wives, be subject to your husbands. Now, husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself up for her. For to love our wives sacrificially, so that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word, that he might present to himself the church in all her glory, having no spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that she would be holy and blameless. So husbands also ought to love their own wives as their own bodies. He who loves his own wife loves himself. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes it and cherishes it, just as Christ also does the church, because we are members of his body. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and his mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. This mystery is great, but I'm speaking with reference to Christ and the church. Nevertheless, each individual among you is also to love his own wife, even as himself. And the wife must see to it that she respects her husband. And this is all of the notes and all of the reading as well. That's a good section. Again, lots of notes to go through. I strongly recommend pausing and reading through the notes. But yeah, this was a good reading today. I love this text. All right, that is all for today. God willing, we'll be back tomorrow. Behold, the word of the Lord.